it happens because it's so ingrained in my mind, the story, that when you're sleeping, it comes to you again, as a dream. It's very interesting.
Yo quisiera brindarle un fuerte aplauso primero a Armand por todo esto. Bravo, bravo
Thank you.
por esta oportunidad. Quisiera hablar sobre el primer trabajo de él, que es curioso porque trata sobre lo que es el tema de lo que son los asesinos seriales, pero quisiera saber sobre cómo fue el contexto o el ambiente que quisiste dar a esta historia y también que nos brinde una experiencia el haber dirigido por primera vez a Tom Hanks.
All right. So the first question is that, first of all, we want to congratulate you for your long trajectory in the industry.
Thank you.
That's why we were clapping in the first place. And
Thank
second
you
of
very
all, we wanted to ask you about the first like the first big things that you did in your career. You have done a lot of pilot work for many TV shows, and also one of your most significant works deals with the subjects of a serial killer. So tell us a bit more about the context of those works you've done for the past few years, and also how did it feel to direct Tom Hanks in his first movie?
Okay, well, that's a big question, because there's a lot to answer there. You want to know first how I started, how it began for me. What was well, I was always attracted to movies from when I was very young. And I was always drawing and sketching pictures of scenes in my head. And then eventually, when I was in maybe high school, I asked my dad to get me a Super 8 camera, and I started making short films with my friends and cutting them together and telling stories, because I didn't have sound. So I did it just through visuals. So I learned how to tell stories visually. And I was always attracted to films that were, suspenseful, or because I grew up watching Alfred Hitchcock and the scarier films, the Hammer films that came out then later on, and I was always those films always intrigued me, but I liked all films. I liked all kinds of films. So I began to work and write and make these short films, and I made a series of short films, and they won some awards. And one of them wasn't a thriller or a suspense film. It was a comedy called Private Worlds of Sophie and Bernie Schwartz. It was a 20-minute film. I made it in 16 millimeter. And I got some friends together and we raised some money and we did it. And it won the award for the best film at the Columbia Film Festival. And the judge was a director named Otto Preminger. And he said, "This is the winner. I want to meet this young man who made the film and bring him to Columbia." So I got to meet Otto Preminger when I was very young, and he was amazing. He not only introduced me to everyone in New York City that was in the film business, in Paramount, United Artists, Columbia Pictures, but he also had me come to his house on a Sunday afternoon for a buffet where he invited all the presidents and people from the motion picture industry and showed my film. And everyone said to me, "Wow, you made a nice film here, but we don't make short films. We make feature films. When you write a script that you want to make, bring it to us and we'll consider it." So I got together with a friend of mine who was a playwright. I had met a few people that were also had the same interests, and we wrote a script, which was actually about growing up in Brooklyn, New York, where I grew up, and two Italian families, and it was a very good script, and it got optioned, by Palomar Pictures, and I got signed by the William Morris Agency. And they were going to make they were getting ready to make the film. They were budgeting it and all. And the producer came over to me, not the producer, the line producer came over and said, listen, you're not going to direct this movie, because you haven't directed a big feature yet, but do you want to make a film? And I said, are you kidding? Of course I do. And he says, I have two friends, two Broadway producers who want to make a horror film, thriller. Do you have one? And I said, sure I do. I didn't know. I didn't have one. But anyway, I got to meet them, and they kept asking me, well, what's the movie about? What's the movie about? And so I started telling a story that I used to tell when I was in the Boy Scouts about being alone at night in the woods and the campfire and that whole thing. And finally, they weren't interested at that point. And I said, they were eating lunch. And I said, well, at that point, we pulled back and we're in a movie theater. And that's on the screen. And the real killer is sitting inside the theater, and he's going to stab someone through the seat. And they liked it. And that became the origins of He Knows You're Alone, which was my first film. Now, we made it for very little money. We had no idea what was going to happen. They were hoping to go to the Cannes Film Festival when it was finished and sell it for foreign. But before that even happened, MGM called, and a couple of the studios called and said, show us the film before you go to Cannes. So they went out and showed the film, and MGM was the first to see it, and they bought it. And that became that film, He Knows You're Alone. Now, how did I meet Tom Hanks, and how was it working with Tom Hanks? Tom Hanks is the most wonderful human being I know. He is still that person that I met many years ago when he came in, and he was not even a member of the Screen Actors Guild. But I was eating lunch, and he stuck his head in, and he said, excuse me, I'm early he was coming because I was doing all the casting for the film. We couldn't afford to hire a casting director. So what happened was he came in, and I started talking to him, and I found him to be such an endearing person. I liked him immediately, and I asked him if he would read with some of the actors that come by, and he said, absolutely. And then I went in and I took his photo and resume, and I turned it over, and all it said was school. I did this in school. I did that in school. He had no experience. He had no acting experience. So the producer said to me, we don't want this guy. He's nobody. We want you to find somebody else. And I said, no, I really like this guy. I really want him in the movie. And they said, no, we can't, because he's not a member of the union, and they'll fine us and this and that. And we argued a bit. And so they said, look, I'm tired of listening to you, because I wouldn't give up. And they said, we'll give him a supporting role, but he can't play the lead. So that's how Tom Hanks got the role. And since then, he's been so generous. He's always brings me on stage when he's someplace, and he says, this is the man who started my career. He got me my SAG card. He hired me, and we meet. He throws his arms around me, gives me a big hug. So he's a very, very nice person. And he was great. He was very great. The thing I liked about him was this easy quality he had about him. He wasn't acting. I said, just do it. Don't try to act it. Just do it. So that was my experience with Tom. And I see him occasionally. We get together.
That's really
a big answer.
No, but it was really important because, first of all, that origin story of yours is fascinating.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the luxury to say that I did this short film that was seen by Otto Preminger. Right. And that I had a lunch with all these big shots, and then that I would meet one of the biggest actors of this past few generations. So
well, two things I have to add to that. There are two other things that are very, very important to my life and to my career. Of course, once I made He Knows You're Alone, I got to make the serial killer movie, The Killing Hour, and that was because William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist and The French Connection, called me and said, I got to meet you. I love your movie. It scared the shit out of me. I want to meet you, and I'm going to make your next movie. And that happened. He made The Killing Hour. He did that. Now, going back a little bit, Another very important director influenced me, and that was Francis Ford Coppola. He was making a film called The Godfather on Staten Island. They were filming the wedding scenes, and it was all closed off. You couldn't go there. So I saw all the extras going up into the buses to go up the hill to do the wedding scene. So I don't know, I just kind of meandered in and fit in with them. And once I got there, I saw this man with a beard and a scarf around his neck, and he was walking around, and Gordon Willis was looking at the light, and he said, we can't shoot, Francis. We're not going to be able to shoot for a while until the clouds are, and Francis was going, God damn it. He was yelling. So I said, well, maybe this is, I should talk to him at this point. So I went up to him and I said, excuse me, can I ask you a question? He said, turned and he says, yeah, what is it? I said, listen, I have to tell you, I make Super 8 movies. I want to be a director someday. Is there any way I could just stay here and watch? I just want to learn as much as I can. And he said, yeah, no problem, no problem. He walked about 10 feet away from me, and somebody put their hand on my shoulder and said, what are you doing here? He turned around and he says, he's with me. And for the next 3 days, I sat next to the camera, next to Francis, and he even got me lunch and everything. And I watched him direct Marlon Brando, Diane Keaton, Al Pacino, all those. You know that scene where she's going, Diane Keaton's going, I didn't know your father knew Johnny Fontaine. I was sitting right there, and Frances kept going like this. And she kept going, I didn't know your father knew John. I didn't know you. He wanted her to smile. And I'm watching him, and I'm looking at her. I says, is that the way you direct? You know, you make faces at the actors. So that was my experience. But he was so, so nice. And then when the film premiered, they invited me to Paramount Pictures to see the screening. And when he did part 2, The Godfather Part 2, I went down again and I met Robert De Niro. I was there on the set. And I learned what a generous man in the midst of all that turmoil and conflict that was going on for him. He was constantly under pressure during making that first movie. He was generous enough to have me be on that set and be a part of it. So I have done that since the beginning, since the first film, He Knows You're Alone. I asked the producers, I said, please go to film schools, call the film schools and see if any kids want to come and be interns on the set. So they learn, they can watch how we, not that I'm a teacher, but I mean, they can experience what it's like to make a film. And I've always done that. Since then, I've always looked to help people and go out and find young talent, because I think that's what this business is about. It's about fostering new people and moving it on and passing it along. And that's what I've been doing.
Wow, you should write a book about that, man.
Well,
Now,
I have many stories.
now just give me 1 second. Cesar is going to ask his question, and then I'm going to translate it for you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Cesar?
Ok, bueno, mi pregunta va relacionada a los capítulos piloto. Armand ha hecho muchos capítulos pilotos para las series, entonces creo que es una responsabilidad muy grande porque muchas veces del piloto depende si se autoriza o no la serie. Entonces, preguntarle qué es lo más difícil y lo que más disfruta de hacer un capítulo piloto.
All right. So Cesar's question is that apart from your film work, you've also done television work, especially directing pilot episodes. So everybody knows that a pilot episode will be like the most important point in order to get a show to be greenlit or not. So what is the most difficult part of doing a pilot, and what is the part that you enjoy the most about doing the pilot?
Oh, the most difficult thing about doing a pilot is that you have 25, 30 people giving you information from the studio or the network. Everybody wants something else. If one executive wants this actress, one executive doesn't want her. So you have to be a politician. You have to play games with these people, because trying to get the film made, it's not like somebody turns over the script to you and says, just go and make the movie. They want their fingers all over it. They call and we didn't like her lipstick. We didn't like the color of the this or the dress, the this. So that's the bad part of making a pilot. The good part is that you get to create a show from its infancy. You don't walk onto a given show that they have everything's established already. The actors are picked, everything is picked, everything, like when you do series and you come on as a director, you basically, the show is running itself because all the actors know that, who they've been playing these characters for a while. All the sets are picked, everything is picked, the costumes, everything is picked. But with a pilot, I get to pick all that. I get to choose and create it from scratch. And I've been fortunate to do several pilots and be involved with a lot of the initial concepts. And in fact, one of them, the Dark Shadows series, they didn't want me to leave after I finished directing two of them. And then they said, we want you to stay on. You're going to produce the show now because we have all the directors. Unfortunately, we can't fire them. So, it's rewarding when you start from scratch and you build your house. But when you come in and you are doing something that has been done over and over and over again, and it's a successful show, you are in a sense just there to move the camera around a little bit and keep it interesting. You don't have the way to start from and make it from infancy.
I see. And what is your favorite pilot from the ones that you directed?
Oh my God, we did one called Freshman Dorm, which was set in like a prep school. We did one. When people ask me what's your favorite film or the most favorite film that you made, it's hard for me to pick because each one of them has something special that has touched me in a certain way. My favorite mini series that I've done was obviously one of them was called The Ring with Nastasia Kinski and Michael York and Leslie Garland. It was shot in Prague and in Switzerland and in New York City. And it takes place during World War II. And I just loved recreating that whole period. And I must add that one of the blessings that has happened for me is that I did not get categorized and I didn't become Wes Craven or John Carpenter, because all they make, and I love those guys because Wes, when he was alive, we worked on a series together. We created Nightmare Cafe. But he said to me, I'm very envious of you. And I said, why? He says, because you are able to make all kinds of films. I can only make horror films. Otherwise, people won't go see them. I said, that's interesting. And I said, well, do you want to switch places? And he said, no. He said, well, I would. He says, because you get to make biblical, you get to make not biblical, historical films. You get to make love stories. You get to make comedies, action film, thrillers, and it's true. That's where I say I've been very blessed because I've always been able to have a diversity in my resume. It's not just horror films or thrillers.
That's awesome, Armand. So yeah, we're going to ask you another question. So stay with me.
Yeah.
¿Qué otra pregunta, chicos?
César.
Ok, bueno, mi siguiente pregunta, ya que mencionó la serie de Dark Shadows, quiero preguntarle sobre eso. Hizo 2 capítulos. Mi pregunta es si aún sigue siendo amante de las historias de vampiros y las historias de amores imposibles.
Talking about Dark Shadows and the vampires and all?
Yes, that's what we're going right now. So Cesar, sorry about that. Cesar was asking about the Dark Shadows revival that you directed.
Yeah.
You directed 2 episodes of that show.
Right after Dan Curtis. Dan Curtis created the show, and he called because he had seen something that I did called Friday the 13th, the series. And he said, I love the way you shot the Marquis de Sade sequence, that whole thing that happens in France. Because I did about 12 or 15 of those Friday the 13th. And each one I tried to make different. And he says, you shoot just the way I shoot. I'd love to meet you. I'm doing a show called Dark Shadows. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember Dark Shadows. He says, but we're going to do it in color. It's going to be a bigger show. And I would love you to come out. And I said, absolutely. And so they flew me out to California. I was living in New York at the time. And, I of course was intrigued but I didn't want it to be campy. I didn't want it to be but it was a soap opera. Dark Shadows was originally a soap opera that people would watch, but I tried to make it different. And that's what they liked about it. Suddenly I did things that I broke some kind of rules, because I went out and it would say in the script, she walks out of her room and stands there, and Barnabas comes and he bites her, right? And I said, wait a minute, let's make this very sexy. I want to make this let's put her in something very sheer, and it's at night and the wind is blowing all across, and let her walk across, because she has this urge to go to him, not he has to come to her. And he's standing out in the night, just in the dark, as this figure just standing there. And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to seduce him. Go over and open his shirt and rub your fingers on his chest like this. This was not in the script. And this took like a half a day to shoot, because it was only a little line in the script. Barnabas bites her on the neck. And then I said, I want you to do something even more different. I want this to become like a sexual thing. And I want you to turn your back to him and bring his head down to you, do it to me, and he's standing behind her. And this became a famous, I think I have a picture here, a famous shot that made the newspaper said, Dark Shadows is brilliant, because it suddenly took on a whole new sexuality. It became very, and I had her pull his head down to her neck. And then as she's breathing quickly, I had the camera slowly pan down to her breasts, and a little droplet of blood goes down in between. It was like an orgasm at the end. And the picture, I'm telling you, let me show it to you. It's right here. Here it is.
Absolutely.
This became.
César, se te cumplió el sueño.
This became
a ver qué.
See?
Oh,
Whoa.
That became the shot of her pulling his head.
Amazing.
And it is very sexy. And that put me on the map for that show, because they all the executives, when they saw that, they said, this is really hot. This is really good. And then I did other things in that show. I broke certain rules, because I said Barbara Steele was in that show, and she played the doctor, and her hair was always pulled back very tight, and she was very, and so I said to Ben Cross, who was wonderful, he played Barnabas. I said, what I want you to do is, when you grab her, I want you to run your fingers through her hair and loosen it up and let it all fall over here, let it be very, like you're going to smash her skull, and these kinds of things were not being done. And so Dan Curtis just absolutely loved it. The studio loved it. And they said, you have got to stay on with this movie. You got to stay on with the show, and you got to produce it for us and make all the directors do what you did. And I went, wow, I don't like to be on the set telling a director, you have to do this, you have to do that. But, because I wouldn't want that done to me. But I would have meetings, and I'd talk about, let's think out of the box a little. Don't make it so obvious. Let's do this, let's do that, and that really propelled my career, because it was, I think that, for any filmmaker who's listening to this, is if you take a chance and you think out of the box a little bit and try to make something that's just a little bit different, or different than what people expect, you're going to be noticed. It's going to stand out. People are going to say, that's different. Gee, that's interesting, as opposed to, oh, I've seen it before.
are you still a fan of vampire stories and stories about impossible loves?
Yes, yes. Actually, one of my dear friends who passed away was Toby Hooper, and he directed Salem's Lot, which I loved the book, and I loved his interpretation of that when he made a miniseries, and I told him, I said, Toby, you did some excellent stuff in there. I love the kid scratching on the glass, floating outside the window. I loved how he created these sequences in the morgue where the woman, the mother, starts to come back to life after she's been killed, and he did some really really good stuff in there. And I would always want to, but I would want to find a new story. I would want to find a new way of telling it. I don't want it to be familiar. Like, so with that, have you seen the movie Let the Right One In, about the little girl? I mean, I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was excellent. The one that was made in Sweden, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then they made it again with Chloe Moretz and the kid from that he grew up now. Cody Fee
Cody
Smith.
Smith McPhee.
Cody Smith McPhee. Yeah. Who was in what was that film with Benedict Cumberbatch? The Western.
The Power of the Dog. That was
Power of the Dog. Yeah, he was excellent in that. But he was the little boy in the one with Chloe Moretz, and yeah, I love that. I love vampire stories, and I would love to make one. Maybe that's. Well, did you see the new Timothy Chalamet movie called Bones and All? I mean, they're cannibals.
Well, I haven't seen it yet because my local cinema had it for like a couple of weeks and I couldn't get in there.
Well,
But
I don't know
Jhon
that it's a
and
big hit, but
yeah, Jhon y César, Armand está preguntando si ustedes han visto Bones and All,
yeah,
la
Bones
que
and
es
All.
con Timothy Chalamet, la de los caníbales.
No,
Todavía
esa no la
no.
he visto. Mm-mm.
You didn't see it?
Oh
Okay.
no.
Not yet, but we will see it
Yes.
eventually.
Promise. De, de hecho, es interesante y qué gran pregunta, César. Gracias. Y yo te quiero preguntar sobre Armand. Hay una película que me pareció que me dejó marcado y seguirá por siempre. En el 2012 me la vi, que se llama Baby Sleep.
Sleep,
Que,
Baby, Sleep.
exacto. Y es algo que la verdad me atrapó totalmente porque habla sobre los sueños. Pero más que todo, como no me afectó, sino más bien como que me impresionó el personaje, que toda esa premonición que hace es bastante increíble. Yo te quiero preguntar sobre si después de esta película has tenido esos sueños que aparecen y complementa historias, que si has soñado con esta historia o con alguna otra gracias a esta personaje, que es una de las mejores películas que yo he visto ver y es increíble.
Okay, I need some help there.
Don't
I know
worry
he's
about it.
talking about Sleep, Baby, Sleep.
Yes, my
Yes.
favorite.
So
It
Jhon is
is?
basically saying that a movie that really touched him on the inside is Sleep Baby Sleep. It's a movie. It's actually one of his favorite movies.
Really?
And what he wants to ask you is that since this is a movie related to dreams, to the subject of dreams, um, the question is if dreams have influenced the way you tell your stories and if you have created stories based on your dreams.
From my dreams, yes. Oh, yes. I my dreams are movies, and I kind of sometimes I use the type of dream that I have, or the method of by which the dream unfolds to tell a story. And yes, in Sleep, Baby, Sleep, the story is about a husband who is so evil. I mean, he goes to the point of using his wife's. She has this problem with forgetfulness, and he makes it's like Gaslight, the movie Gaslight. He's slowly driving her crazy because it's all about stealing the baby and where is the baby, and I wanted it to almost be like a dreamlike state when we shot it, like her remembering how she opened the doors and how she did this, and it almost like a reoccurrence of a dream. And I used a lot of that in the style of filming it too. I wanted it to be very dreamlike because I wanted to be inside her head as much as we could be, because we're telling the story from her point of view. And it's interesting, a friend of mine who I made movies with when we were kids in Brooklyn also became a director and a writer, and he wrote the script to that. John Gray, he wrote the script based on a book. It was based on a novel. But yes, I do think dreams play a big part in filmmaking, because I'll tell you something. Sometimes when I'm making a film, I dream about how the scene is going to play out. Sometimes it happens because it's so ingrained in my mind, the story, that when you're sleeping, it comes to you again, as a dream. It's very interesting.
Es interesante. A mí me gustó mucho la que tiene atrás de portada, que es la profecía celestina. Es algo muy bueno. Yo te quiero preguntar sobre cómo usted describe la naturaleza a través de sus películas, y también te pregunto, ¿qué debe conocer el mundo o la sociedad sobre tu contribución con el infierno de Dante? Esta.
John's question is about the Celestine prophecy, which is the poster one of the other poster that you have behind you. So it's a very interesting movie, and he wants to ask you about what is your perception about nature, and how can you engage your audience to know more about Dante's Inferno through your movies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm involved in projects. There's a gentleman who's doing a lot on Dante's Inferno, and he's involved me because of Celestine prophecy. He contacted me. But what is the idea? Are we going to sign out? Because I see we have 5 minutes left. Or do you want me to finish this in 5 minutes?
Yes, finish the question in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then
Okay. So the Celestine prophecy became it was a huge bestseller, a book. And they had approached me to do it as a television movie once. And I said, no, I wasn't interested at the time. Later on, they rewrote it as a feature film. The writer and another producer got involved, and they made the film, and they came to me and said, we would like you to direct this, but before you direct it, you have to meet with James Redfield, who wrote the book, because he wants to interview you to see if you have the aura to make this film. And look, I had read the book, and I understood what he was doing, what he was going for. And the things that meant so much to me about that book was about synchronicity, things that happen for a reason. And also the fact that if we were just harmonious and we lived harmonious, if we enjoyed and loved each other and didn't mistreat each other and have so much conflict in this world, we would realize that heaven is right here on earth. It's all around us. It's in nature. It's in the sky and the birds and the beauty of the flowers, and that's what we tried to bring out in that film, is that the heaven that we think of, it's really right here. It's all around us. We just don't see it because we are so absorbed with our own conflicts, jealousy, envy, hatred. Nation hates another nation. Husband hates wife. Another guy hates this guy. We have so much of that going on in our lives that we are blinded by the fact that all the beauty and all that exists in nature is right in front of us. And we tried to show that in the film. I tried to, hopefully depict some of that. We're getting close, but I wanted to say that that's a different type of movie than Dark Shadows, a different type of movie than Sleep Baby Sleep. So it enabled me to make all different kinds of films, all different kinds of genre films, and all different topics. And that's one of the most appreciative things I am of that, because I got the opportunity to do all that, to make those films, and not just be stuck in one genre. I lost you.
Not and
Okay.
not everyone has that luxury
That's
to
correct. I know.
to be on different genres because, like you said, Wes Craven, John Carpenter, these are David Cronenberg. These are guys that are
Wonderful.
like they have done lots of great films on different genres. But the first thing that people will always say when they talk about those directors is horror.
A horror film.
Horror.
Horror, yeah.
Yeah, even though Carpenter has done awesome action movies, Wes
Yeah.
Craven has done drama. Cronenberg
Wes
has
Craven
done
made,
thrillers.
Music of the Heart, a story with Meryl Streep. Nobody went to see it, and he felt terrible. And I agree. He made a beautiful film.
Yeah, haven't seen that yet, but I'm really eager to revisit most of
Yeah.
Wes Craven's works.
I'm so impressed that you guys, or John had the ability to find some of these older films of mine that are, I don't even know that they still play. But because I probably I made that in 90 something. How did he see it? I mean, was it something they showed it on TV there or something?
Well, the power of internet, but
Oh, Power of Internet, of course.
yes, but
Shows you
sometimes
how
there are
old
some
I am.
films. But there are some films that we were not allowed to see at certain times of the day. Obviously, our curiosity is always there.
Mi pregunta va referente a la película que tengo atrás de mí, que es Black Widow. Ayer tuve oportunidad de verla, está en Tubi, por si alguien tiene oportunidad también de echarle un ojo. Entonces, creo que el tema de las Black Widow es un tema muy recurrente, pero sin embargo, creo esta película me gustó, me atrapó desde el principio. Entonces, en sí mi pregunta es, ¿cuál fue el mayor reto grabando esta película?
So Cesar's, well, the final question, which is Cesar's, is about the movie Black Widow. It's a movie that he watched on Tubi and recommends to everyone who gets the chance to see it to watch it on Tubi, please. And the subject matter about Tubi the subject matter about Black Widow is the one that fascinated him the most. So he's asking, what was the biggest challenge for you when you made this movie?
The biggest challenge? I wasn't really challenged with that film. I mean, that film kind of it was more of a drama of people deceiving other people. I mean, that's really what it was. It wasn't a horror film or anything like that, but it was a story about a sociopath who decides to get whatever she wants and stops at nothing. And so I had fun with that because I worked with Elizabeth, and she was very, very open to exploring um, different attitudes, so that she would never give herself away, or so she'd be so alluring to some man that she could get whatever she wanted, and she was very good with that. I had a lot of fun with that when we made that film. Actually, it wasn't a challenge. But there's one, I don't know, has he seen a film called Dark Desire? That's also, I think it's on Tubi right now.
Let me ask. César te pregunta Armand si has visto una película llamada Dark Desire, que también está en Tubi.
No, esa no la he podido ver.
On Tubi.
Prometo que la veré.
He hasn't seen it yet, but he
Darkland.
promises that he will do.
Darkland, esa es una película, creo que no está en Tubi.
It's called Dark Desire.
Dark
Ah.
Desire, como
And
deseo oscuro.
it's like Black Widow,
Pero no la he
because
visto.
it's also about deception. It's about a person who goes after whatever they want. Oh, it's a little bit like Talented Mr. Ripley. You remember that film?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's about a young man who has to. It's the opposite of Black Widow. He's a young man who lures his way into people's lives and manipulates them. and commits murder if he has to. It's a more recent film of mine, and it's on Tubi, right? If you want to see it, so I'm sure.
La veré, prometo que veré esa película.
Cesar keeps promising that he will watch.
Okay, yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I'm so pleased that you know of these films. I mean, I guess you're right. You know, everything's on the internet, but that you spend the time to watch them, because some of them feel dated today. I mean, if you would go by today's standards, you know, and these were films that were made for specific networks that were, you know, had certain restrictions. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. It wasn't like a feature film where you could be as explicit as you want. These films came with certain restrictions, but listen, I appreciate the enthusiasm and the you know, interest. It's really flattering. Thank you very much.
Oh, sir, it was our pleasure. So before we go, please let us know where we can find you, if you have social media, and if
Yes,
you have like Facebook, Twitter,
Facebook,
Instagram,
Facebook.
etc.
I
Where
don't.
can we find you?
I'm on Facebook. It's just, and there's also a Facebook page for Dark Desire, which we put up. So you just go to Armand Mastroianni on Facebook, I guess. Do you? And there's also a Dark Desire page. So there's also a lot of pictures and things there. Are you able to use any stills in this?
Nos pregunta Armand si puedes usar stills o fotogramas para la entrevista.
Sí, claro, yo complemento a través de fondo eso. Pero antes de poder culminar,
La foto.
sí, y pues la foto no, en el 2007 él realizó Pandemia, y me
Pandemic.
parece tan curioso que este capítulo, cuando anunciaron lo del COVID en el 2020,
Yeah.
justamente visualicé en internet Pandemia y fue tan loco. Solo dígale eso, que no sé, fue algo que jamás esperaríamos.
Well, Jhon is saying that he recently saw Pandemic, which is a miniseries that you made in 2007. And now that we have all the thing about the pandemic, the COVID-19,
COVID-19, yeah.
it felt like a very kind of prophetic thing, kind of a curious thing. So that's what he wanted to say.
When I made that film, I mean, it was it was a big film, because we shot a lot in a lot of different locations. There was a large cast, and I also said, look, I wonder how this is going to look with all these people walking around with these masks on. I mean, we're not going to be able to see their faces, but we lived it. Several years later, we had the COVID-19, and everybody's walking around with masks. And that isn't the only virus movie I've made. I've made like 7 virus movies, pandemic movies. One was called Virus, with Nicolette Sheridan and William Devane, and it was about the Ebola virus. The other one was The Pandemic. Then there was one called Fatal Error, which was a computer virus that goes into your eye and kills you. Then there was Final Approach, which was also Fatal Error and Final Approach, and Nowhere to Land, where there was a virus on the plane. I'm telling you, I don't know why I got picked to do all these virus movies, but I learned a lot, and it certainly was informative as to, you know, living it later on and saying, oh my God, can you believe it? You know, when COVID-19 came out, they started showing Pandemic on Amazon. It was the #1 film.
That's great.
Because people were saying, look at this, we're living this. And they made a movie about it years before.
Fiction met reality in the end.
Yeah. Sounds like a place everybody should go to. Everybody should be there.
Yeah. And also the submissions are now open. just to let you know.
Yep. Well,
For-
everybody should submit to the Turin Horror Film Festival. The dates are June 2nd to June 4th. And I wish everybody much success from one filmmaker to the other.
Can you please repeat the salute one more time? Just one more time.
Yeah, sure. I wish everyone who submits much success from one filmmaker to another. This is Armand Mastroianni wishing you all the very best.
Thank you, Armand.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, if you know Italian, it will be much easier to learn Spanish because the
Yeah.
Italian and Spanish are like relative languages. So
Well, I was in Italy just before the COVID, and they brought me to Italy to make me an honorary citizen in my father's hometown because of all the films and everything. And it was nice because I got on a television there. They interviewed me, and I was able to speak something, but I didn't want to speak sound like very, very stupid. So I had someone there who was also translating for me because I could converse somewhat in Italian, but I'm not fluent. It's not my main language. But I grew up speaking when I lived as a child in Brooklyn. My aunts used to speak Italian, so that's where I picked it up from. Well, my best to all of you. Stay healthy and safe. Ciao.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Armand.
My
God bless
pleasure.
you.
My pleasure.
Good
So nice
weekend,
to
man.
meet you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.